Kicks 105.5 WKXH. Good morning, I'm JJ. It is Wednesday, August 10th at 7:49. 67 degrees outside. I'll have your full weather forecast coming up in just a little bit. But right now in the studio, we have Mike Barrett from the Barrett Insurance Agency with us this morning. Good morning, Mike.
Hey, good morning. Another lovely day.
It is.
Humidity is dipped, which is pretty good, right? That's always the complaint. It's not the temp. It's always the humidity, right? So.
Oh, it was humid the last few days.
Yes, so getting pretty nice out there. Enjoying the summertime before it ends, right?
Well, it'll end before we know it.
Well, indicators are there. I mean, the Haverhill Fair was a few weeks ago. Danville Fair was this past weekend. I see a Caledonia County Fair flyer in front of you. All telltale signs that summer's coming to a close at some point here. So this morning for Good Policies, what I thought we would do is we talk about something. I try to keep it pretty general in nature in our conversations, right? Because I don't want to speak to such a small audience. I want to make sure I'm helping people in general if we can. But I have a conversation this morning that I think is pretty worthy of bringing to air, and that is workers' compensation insurance.
Aha.
Workers' compensation insurance, the bane of many folks' existence. It's not always fun, right? So I wanted to talk about some of the high points. We're going to do a high-level discussion about it. Workers' compensation insurance, when do you need it? Well, you need it by law when you have employees. So if you are compensating somebody to do a job that you've hired them for, you by law need to have workers' comp. There's a couple of times where you're not required by law to have that. Obviously, there's some folks like farming operations are not necessarily required. They can tend to be exempt from that requirement from the state. Although I always tell people don't get insurance because you have to, get it because you need it. So a lot of farmers do carry it, which is great. But like here, you have workers' compensation covering you in your employment here at the radio station. I have it covering myself and my employees at my office. And it's required because if we sustain an injury on the job, whether we have health insurance or not, it's going to be the workers' compensation that will have to cover the loss of wages, the medical expenses associated with injuring myself or injuring yourself on the job. So very important to have. So how is workers' comp rated? Well, it's rated based on what the people are doing, right? So you're here at the radio station, so you'd probably be considered an office rating. So pretty minimal cost. For me, I'm an insurance guy. I'm an office rating too. Again, pretty minimal cost. But as you start looking at the different categories and risks associated with jobs, you start seeing it really climb exponentially, right? So somebody who maybe works on vehicles, like a mechanic, somebody who's a logger or works for logging operations, somebody who works at a restaurant or a bartender, you'll see higher rates for them too. I'm not talking about the highest of the high, but I'm certainly talking about drawing a comparison between the office being pretty low and the other exposures being pretty high. If you work in a retail environment, a convenience store, things like that, certainly going to have a specific rate. And the way that workers' comp is rated on per $100 of remuneration. So for every $100 that you are paying somebody, expect the workers' compensation fee to be a part of that calculation, right? So for every $100 you're paying somebody for an office like us, probably 26 cents for every $100 that you're paying somebody is what you would owe to workers' comp to cover that. All right, so that's how it's rated. So workers' compensation, vital to have. I don't care if it's your best friend or relative that's working for you. If they sustain a very serious injury, unfortunately, you're going to be held liable. Think about, I've had 2 incidents in my life where I've injured myself, where my health insurance company has come back at me and they've tried to figure out why. Because they're paying for me to have surgeries, and they're going, well, what's this all about? How did this occur? And they're asking to see if it was maybe an auto insurance incident or if it was a workers' compensation. And if it's workers' compensation, they're going to say, look, sorry, we don't need to pay for this because this is a workers' compensation requirement. The workers' compensation insurance needs to pay for it. And many times I don't see folks filing claims in an appropriate time fashion. So that's the biggest thing I wanted to point out. And there's another big one after this. But for when somebody sustains an injury on the job, all right, so you're the boss or you have a whatever your business is, somebody sustains an injury. There's a first notice of injury report that you should be filling out immediately. I think it's a 48-hour window to send it into the state and notify your workers' compensation carrier. So it's on the state of Department of Labor website. If you don't have it, grab it, make it part of your protocol to make sure you're reporting injury, whether they had to seek medical attention or not. You need to have that paper trail. Very, very important, okay? A lot of folks, what they do is they don't report it, and then all of a sudden the person who got injured, maybe somebody cut themselves cutting while cooking or something, They went to the hospital, their health insurance paid for it. Now their health insurance is saying, oh, wait a minute, that was on the job injury. You need to have your employer cover that. And that's when we see it report. Don't do that. Report it right within the 48-hour window to be compliant. Very, very, very important. And then the final thing, workers' comp being based on every $100 of payroll. Remember, it's an auditable account. Every year, you're at your renewal time, you're going to have to complete an audit to report the wages that were spent that year to make sure your policy is rated properly. You might get a refund, you might owe more money, but you have to do it. So that's the high-level discussion of workers' comp. I think you had questions, though. I could tell in your eyes.
I was working on it. I had prior to this, way prior to this.
Yep.
I had I started a little home improvement business.
Sure.
And I was doing, fixing stairs and fences and mowing lawns and cleaning up and,
Yep.
hedges and, cutting up down trees or whatever. And it got too much for me to do on my own.
Right.
So I hired day help.
Mm-hmm.
Now, so if you hire just day help, okay, I'm just going to hire you for the day.
They're still working
do
for
this
it.
job. You still need that workers'
You
comp.
really should. Yeah, you could, depending on how your payroll is being reported, you could be held in violation and be fined for not having had workers' compensation. But the worst time to find out that you needed workers' comp isn't necessarily when you get fined for not having it. It's when somebody sustains an injury and you find out that you're personally liable because you didn't have workers' comp. It can be a scary proposition. You don't hear about it very often, thankfully, right? But it does happen. So.
Yes. Well, like, say you're a roofer.
Yeah.
There's a lot of risk there if you fall off the roof.
Absolutely.
Or you get tangled up with a power line.
Oh, yeah.
I read a story about the other day. Somebody was running from the cops and grabbed a hold of a power line. Who's responsible for that?
I'm assuming them. But, it's one of those things that even some of the contractors out there, they're starting to take bids on jobs, especially if it's for a larger business or a corporation where that corporation is saying, look, you need to provide us proof of insurance, and that proof of insurance needs to be a general liability policy, a commercial auto policy, and a workers' compensation policy in a lot of cases. So there's many reasons to have it. I think it's about if you have business insurance of any kind and you don't have workers' compensation, think about why you might need it. Maybe have a conversation with your agent to make sure you're not missing something that you really should have.
So going back to when I was doing my little home improvement business thing there. And I wanted to do everything legal. I didn't want to get wrapped up in any legal stuff.
Sure.
I wanted to make sure everything was above board. And they were telling me it was like $2,000 a person up front for a workman's comp.
It can be, depending on the classification. Some of them are up to $20+ per $100 of payroll. So think about it. You're paying somebody, $20,000, $30,000, $40,000 a year for every $100 of that. Divide it, right? And that's going to give you a pretty good indicator of whether you need work, what your workers' compensation cost is going to be. That's why a lot of people who own offices will include themselves as the owner, whether they're members of a corporation or officers of a corporation or members of an LLC. They'll include themselves, but you do have the option to exclude yourself. And in a situation where you maybe have a roofing company or a higher risk, excluding yourself can make sense because that can save you thousands of dollars a year. You're taking an inherent risk by not having it, but you're covering the requirements by your employees having it without breaking the bank. You can always find alternative options for you. So, Interesting stuff. Something to think about as a business owner for sure.
So next time I open up a home improvement business, I will call Mike Barrett at the Barrett Insurance Agency.
Absolutely. Simple to do. 748-5224. You can find us on Portland Street in St. Johnsbury. Online, thebarrettagency.com. Google, Facebook, and YouTube. Just look for Barrett Insurance Agency.
Well, thank you, Mike.